Right, and that's next little comparison test that I want to do between the three papers. So again, that's the LuxArchival, Clairefontaine Pastelmat, and the Uart Sanded. Is I want to just try using liquid on the paper now. I know how it works on Pastelmat, but again, we're just going to do a side-by-side comparison. So the first one I'm going to try out is using some Zest-It pencil blend, like a solvent, and then the second one we will do is I will try out some of my watercolour pencils. So we'll just try some watercolour pencils on there and just see how they blend, see how it takes the water. It'd be nice to try it on a bigger sheet actually, so maybe we'll just find a space on the corner for adding the water to. But first of all, let's just see how this works with layering some pencil down, some pigment down, and then just adding some pencil blend. So I'm going to do exactly the same on each one. So let's just get it nice and central and start. Let's have a look. There we go. So let's just start putting some pigment down, and now I'm going to be using the same pressure on each piece of paper, and this is really blowing me away. I know I said that on the initial test that I did at the top, and if you haven't seen those tests, they're on here as well. So when we used Zest-It or any type of solvent, there's one thing there I should have took note of. Okay, so this is polychromos. So if you see here how much dust is coming off, you see all that dust there? So that gives you an idea of how rough that surface is to the touch. So I'm coming in here and laying actually with a tiny bit more pressure on the Pastelmat. Now coming in again on the Uart. You see the amount of dust that's coming off. I say that gives a really good indication to you at home how rough this surface is. Now, to be able to use, go back to what I was saying, to be able to use a solvent or liquid blender, you need a good few layers down. But can you see already the difference between the lay down on these three papers? So I'm going to come in, what I'll do is I'll grab one of my pale colours as well. So just using some of my greens and yellows here, just so I've got a nice build-up of pigment. It's strange, but that piece of Pastelmat just seems quite alien to me now. This just seems normal. I can't believe the speed in which it has built up that lovely blend. I want to come in over the top with a pale colour. In fact, let me just grab my white. So I'm just using the polychromo because obviously that's what's recommended, is to use more of your translucent oil-based pencils on this paper. So this is at the point where normally I say I'd add this on my Pastelmat and we'd get a lovely blend and softening, which it has, but it's hardly covered the tooth at all. So if you're the type of person that gets impatient with Pastelmat, you want to do less layers but work in the same method. You want it to blend beautifully and smoothly with your layers, then the LuxArchival's looking great. Obviously the Uart is blending lovely, it's just that it's that sandpaper colour. So I'm going to take some of my pencil blend, just dispense that, and take a little brush and a tissue just to take off any excess. We will be trying it obviously for the amount of liquid that we can put down on that later on. This is just to see how it blends. In fact, I'm not going to take off too much excess. So let's go in first of all and show you what happens when we do this on our Pastelmat. And we need to let it dry as well. Okay, so that's the Pastelmat. Oh, it's got a bit of a reflection. Let me just turn my light where it's gone wet. In fact, there we go, that's better. So now let's come in on the UArt and do exactly the same. Clean off my brush. I know I was using the same colour pigment, so that's reflective now. Let me just see if I can move my light yet again. There we go. So now let's come in on... Do you know what? I saw a lot of bleed there. As soon as I put the liquid down, there was a lot of bleed, but coverage-wise, with the pigment, that LuxArchival has come out almost like you've put paint down. It's not hardly lost any of the pigment. Not much has lifted off at all. This on the Pastelmat is sunk down like we expect it to. I've got a feeling that this is going to work amazingly for the inks. Like the Pastelmat, I only use Pastelmat for my ink work because it pools and it spreads and it bleeds really well compared to other papers, especially compared to watercolour papers. So we'll let these dry anyway, and then we can try working over the top. But here, you can see it's just a little bit splotchy. So that's the... using the pencil blend Zestit solvent with our oil pencils. Next I'm going to move down and let's try out how much water we can add using our watercolour. Or should we do the inks first? Let's spread out a little bit. Let's zoom out a little bit as well. And let's try our inks. Now I know how well the inks bleed on the Pastelmat. Just whilst those layers are drying up there. There we go. So, I'm going to come in with the inks first then. Give them a little bit of a shake. Now I tend to use the... as I'm shaking, I tend to use the Winsor & Newton inks, and then I will use like an acrylic ink in there as well to really make it pool out. Let me grab one of my acrylic inks. Okay, so I've got my inks already here. Whilst I'm just about to do my inks, if you look here we can see those solvents have dried now. Let me pull them all in together. Better idea. There we go, let's zoom in. So remember, LuxArchival is on the left, Pastelmat in the centre, and our UArt sanded there on the right hand side. Let me just come back in again over the top with, let's come in with our white pencil over the top. So you can see here just that one application, and we can start to come in, and these pencils now, I haven't even got a super sharp pencil, it's quite blunt, are coming down. These strokes are going on really nice and smooth. Now if I come in on the Pastelmat, okay, thing is with the Pastelmat, if you remember, I always say to you, let it go away and dry. So this, I'm not sure what the surface is made of, this is much quicker to work on. So that solvent is dried, and it's allowing us to go straight in. The cellulose fibres on this Pastelmat are not dry. My pencil is skidding on the top, so I would need to wait a good few hours for that to dry. The UArt, yeah, again, pencil is going on, but it's actually going on with the same initial grains that we noticed in our first application up here. So we'd need to get a lot more pigment down on there to be able to start creating these smooth lines that we're already able to go in and create with the LuxArchival. It doesn't mean that you can't come in and carry on building lots of layers, because obviously you can. I'm managing to get some to go down on that Pastelmat, but I also know that I'm crushing the tooth because it's still damp and swollen. Okay, so I think that's a really nice example so far of the difference between the papers. So now I'm going to come on to the inks. Just spread this out again. There we go. So I've got my Winsor & Newton inks I shook up, and I've also got my FW Artist Acrylic ink, which is the one that I use to dispel. So let's grab a brush. Let's go in with our ink. And let's make a mess. So what I'll do, I'll come in. I just want to see how this pulls out on here now. It's not really bleeding, which is a surprise because I thought it was going to bleed. Like when I added the solvent, it seemed to bleed. So the Pastelmat is bleeding a little. You'll see it more. Can you see it starts to cauliflower out? Okay, and now onto the UArt. UArt's great, but it's not sitting very evenly at all there. You can see that. And also, obviously, the colour of that UArt base, it's just, you've got to account for it when you're putting an application down. So it's losing that true value hue of the ink that I'm adding. So I'm going to go in now with a yellow ink and see if I can get it to bleed into the turquoise. Let me just move this up and try and zoom in a little bit there as well, so you can see what I mean about that bleed. So you can see around the edge of the Pastelmat one, we've got that bleed. Here it's gone down and it's stayed within the lines, which means if you're adding liquid to a piece using different media, it's not going to spill out. On the Pastelmat, when I use inks, I want it to spill. On here, if you want to control it, you're going to be able to. So let me just come in there, a little touch of a yellow, and see what kind of bleed that we can get. Because I do like to try and make my colours bleed when I use the inks. That is giving a nice effect there. Just take one in over the top of the other. Okay. UArt surprised me with UArt where it is sanded. I expected that to gather up the ink a lot better than it has done. So 3 completely different results there. And again, I actually like the effect. It's got a really nice bleed in and out of the colours. This one is a bit more cauliflowery, but that's the one I'm used to using. Let me just come in now then with our acrylic ink and see if we can dispel any of our coloration there. Let's get a fresh brush. And add a bit of water as well. There we go. So I'm just going to come in here. The acrylic ink is basically it's thicker. And so it should sit and dispel the inks laid down, and you can see it there better. That's the effect that I'm usually after, but that's because I aim for that effect on my inky splodgy drawings. I want that bleed. No, on the UArt it's just all blending in together. So you can see on the UArt it's sort of all blended in. The Pastelmat, it has dispelled. That's what I was looking for when I do it. But can you see now just how much that ink has cauliflowered out and bled? On the LuxArchival, there's not much bleed, but it has pooled there. So there is a limit there to how much of that liquid it was going to take from me. Now, just so it doesn't make a mess, I'm going to lift that off. It's given a much smoother application. Beautiful blend on it. So as those inks are drying up above, I'm going to come in now just with 3 more watercolour pencils. We just want to get an idea of how these... I've also got watercolour marker pens to try out on the paper too. So I've actually got my Albrecht Dürer watercolour markers here that I'm going to be trying out on it. I might actually, and I've also got Pitt pens, but I'm going to actually do another tutorial, full tutorial for those. So let's come in. Application of our watercolour pencils. I'm just going to put down 3 colours, same pressure. So again, that's the same pressure going down there. So in theory, it should be the same amount of pigment. But it depends, let's say, on the grip and the tooth of that paper, so how much the paper grabs the pigment. So let's mix some of this over the top. So these are just quick little tests, little play tests, but if you haven't got the papers or the pencils, and you don't want to spend the money on buying all the papers and the pencils just to do the test yourself to find out that you don't actually like what it does, you can just use these as, you know, as examples. Make sure I've got all those in shot. Now, see, I'm used to putting down very little pigment on the Pastelmat to give a really good effect. I always say less is more with my application. Okay, so now let's add some water. So I'm going to clean off my brush. There we go. So let's come in first of all on that's our Uart. So again, blends lovely. Kind of muddifies a little bit. So now let's come in on our Pastelmat. I expect this to give us a much truer and softer blend, which it does. That's what I'm used to. Obviously I've been using Pastelmat for years, so that's what I'm used to. That is beautiful. There's no way I would look to use watercolour pencils on the Uart. I have done in the past, but it's much more controlled, much more representative actually on here. So let's just see what the LuxArchival does for us. Now I'm finding I need more water. Already halfway across there. I think, to be honest, I need more water because I just feel that it grabs, same proof of it was up here, it grabs more pigment. As you do the lay down of the pigment, it grabs more on the lay down, and hence there's more pigment down there. So I needed more. When you add water to watercolour pencils, basically there's a colourless binder in there, like a cellulose binder. And all you're doing, same with adding solvent or the pencil blend to your oil or wax pencils, you're just dissolving the binder. Watercolour pencils have just got a different type of binder in there that is water soluble, so adding water means you dissolve the binder. So the fact that this needed more water on the LuxArchival just meant that there was more binder down there, i.e. there's more pigment down on there. So this will dry. I expect the one in the middle to go quite pale, quite soft. This one over here, I can still see the texture of the paper as well. I'm really not happy with that. But if you go back up, see how this is drying quite nicely now? it seems to have cleaned up a bit, and you can see where the white acrylic tried to disperse, and it's given a nice effect there. I prefer that effect actually to the LuxArchival. Pastelmat, like I say, it's got that bleed, and that is the bleed that I love using. Watercolour pencils, lovely. So there's some really nice tests there. I'm tempted just to keep going. So I'm going to shuffle these along, and then what we'll do is we'll come back and just review them all right at the end. So I know for the powder blender I'm going to need to use my fixative, and also I'll need a little bit more time because I need to spray, let it dry, spray, let it dry. Let me just zoom out again. So whilst we've got the watercolour pencil test there, let me just come in with these watercolour markers quickly. Might as well do this all at the same time, and it's alongside each other. So these are the Albrecht Dürer watercolour pens, and that is pooled quite a lot. Can you see the amount of liquid that's pooled around there? Pastelmat, it's sunk really nicely, and there's no warping. I know this is the board, but there's no warping. I can see warping on the Uart. There's no warping at all on the LuxArchival, and there wouldn't be on the Pastelmat whether it was on the board or not either. So quick play, just a quick scribble. Slide that one across. Okay. And then the lovely thing with these Albrecht Dürer markers is you can come in over the top, same as with your pencils. You can just mix and blend. So I'll just add some of this. I expect on the Pastelmat a very similar effect as to the watercolour pencils, but actually more watercoloury, if that makes sense. Okay, so again, let's get some water. You can see the difference in the application of that as well. This has kind of dragged a lot of the red pigment up. Here you can actually see that I was using a grey pen there, and also here you can see I was using a grey pen. So it's amazing. So I'm just adding water here. You can see here I've just added the water there to the Albrecht Dürer watercolour pens, and that's on the Uart. Come in the same here now with on the Pastelmat. Much more, like I said, you're going to get a much more of a watercolour effect on the Pastelmat. You can pull and blend and soften the edges. Very similar to using the pencils. It does give a beautiful painterly effect. So now let's just come in and try the same thing on the LuxArchival. Now, because the solvent was very controlled, I expect this to be very controlled as well, but it does seem to have blended all three colours together, whereas here we've got a lovely distinction. Let's see if I can soften up that. The edge is softening up really nicely there as well. I'll just soften up the other side of both. It's beautiful. You can see it gives a... I love these pens. I need to do more work with them. They're so quick to use, and then you can use your pencils over the top. There. So that, start to finish, shows our application. Let's pull them all back down again. So we started off right at the beginning just looking at the strokes. and the roughness, and the fact that I use the same 3 colour pencils here, same pressure of application, and the difference that, you know, the amount of pigment of a LuxArchival is grabbing the tooth compared to the Pastelmat. What happens when we add solvent? Again, it's all reflective of how much pigment that surface is grabbing, so that when we add the solvent over here, it's thicker. So it's going to be a lot less work. You can put the same amount of layers down, dry layers, onto this surface if you like, compared to the Pastelmat, but you don't need to. The Pastelmat you're going to keep needing to go to get rid of that grainy tooth, whereas on here, on the LuxArchival, same as on the Uart to a degree, it seems to be grabbing more pigment, so you need less layers to be able to get to that point where you can put down sharp lines. So then we came in and we had a little play with the inks, and you can see this even more now. This is the beautiful bleed that I love on Pastelmat, so I want that, but it's got a lovely soft bleed here on the Uart, quite controlled, it stayed within the space. Here you've got a partial bleed, but it's quite controlled, so if you want to use something like inks, in fact, let's do one last test. Somewhere, here we go, in my little boxes of goodies, I have got some Inktense pencils. Don't use them very often, but let's just give those a go as well, just as one last comparison whilst we're doing this wet and dry. So what I'm going to try and do is spin this lot around. I'm not sure how we're going to fit all these in now. Let me see if I can bring our LuxArchival down. Here we go, this should work. Okay, so I've grabbed some of my Inktense. We're going to do this one last test, and then we'll just go back and do a little review of our wet applications that we've put down. So I'm just going to I've grabbed 4 pencils here. Just going to come in, same pressure of application on each surface. I don't tend to use Inktense. I say these were given to me. I've done a comparison test of them once next to my Winsor & Newton inks, but I haven't really used them. But I know some of you do use Inktense, so again, this will give you a little idea of the comparison between different surfaces. It's going down so nicely on that LuxArchival, so I'm going to come in and mix some white over the top there. I must point out, Aliana did not send me these papers for me to review and test like this. She has not asked for me. She sent them to me as a gift because she wanted me to, you know, try them out as an artist. She's not expecting me to come back and go, wow, I love them, you know, or, you know, I don't owe her anything from having this paper apart from, you know, my gratitude and a big thank you for her sending them to me. So the opinions I'm giving are honest. The fact you guys know how much I love Pastelmat. I've used it for years. It's my mainstay. Yeah, I stray off to other papers, but I always come back to Pastelmat. I teach on Pastelmat. So my opinion on these papers, this comparison, is honest. I mean, you can see it for yourself anyway. So again, it's coming out really nice on the Pastelmat, lovely and gentle. This will probably dry better. We'll go through the comparisons again in a second when they are dry. And again, I need to top up on water halfway across because I think, again, it seems to have grabbed more pigment on there. Okay. So I'll just wait for that to dry and then we'll come back and just do a comparison of all of those ones that we added the water to. Right, I know I keep saying this, that we're just going to do one more test before I stop. But I've just thought about something else that I was going to create on another video, but let's just put it all down here. Some of you will know my Pastelmat video where I show 3 layers as opposed to repetition of those layers and how to get rid of the grainy tooth. So I'm going to do it quite quick. I'm not going to draw out squares. Well, I suppose I could just draw out a quick square. Let's just do this one. So, quick square. I don't want to do this huge. Let's do sort of just over an inch square. There's our 3 boxes. Now, last time I used polychromos. This time I'm going to go with the Derwent Lightfast. Just see how much, in the comparison as well on the Pastelmat, how quickly that builds up compared to the polychromos I used last time. Last time I think I put 45 layers down, but I could have put 60 down. Could be right, could be wrong. So I work dark to light. So I'm going to use, I've got a black, I've got a mid blue, I've got a light aqua. Let me just see. Let's swap that out. No, light aqua will be fine. So what I'm going to do is keep note of the amount of layers. So same pressure. Coming in first of all with the black on each one. Okay, so that's 1 layer. I'll just keep a note here on the Pastelmat of what we've done. Then I'll come in with the blue on each one. You can already see how rich that is building up over there on the right hand side. So then when we add on textured paper, when we then go in with a pale colour, that's when it mixes and blends with the colours and tones underneath and it softens. Okay, so that's 3 layers. So now black. And again, this will show you that you can go dark to light on all of these papers as well. So 4 layers onto our blue. I know I'm not staying inside the square, but this is just a quick little demo for you. Onto our aqua, or our light colour. Just remember left to right using Uart, middle one is our Pastelmat. And can you see how much pigment there is still coming off? Which goes to show how much tooth there is still there. So that's now 6 layers. So you get the idea. So I'm going to speed up now whilst I just carry on, and you'll see me putting the layers down. But I've got a feeling, obviously, we're going to get there a lot quicker on here than we will on our Pastelmat. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. And I'll zoom in to show you the effects on each paper. Okay, so we actually did 21 layers there. Now, anyone who's done and watched my video on the square, let's say you know that I've used polychromos, and I can keep going and keep going and keep going. And then I can come in with a sharp pencil and still go over the top. Now, I noticed when I was putting down on the UArt, it was a little bit blotchy. It was missing out some areas, almost like there's little creases there where the pigment's not even picking up, so it's almost like I would need to use a solvent to sink that down. Very uneven surface there. Now the Pastelmat, again, I expect that to happen. I'm going to come in with a knife as well. It's mixed and blended nicely. The board, this sheet of board has actually, because there's less, it's smoother than the darker surfaces, it has gone on very evenly. Now, I have noticed there's a tiny little bit of sort of what I call grainage here. And I don't know whether that's just the fact that I'm using the Derwent Lightfast. I'm not sure. But again, it's mixed and blended, built up nicely. Obviously, I'm used to the Pastelmat. This is something, if I did it with the polychromos on the LuxArchival, I'd probably get a result that I'm more familiar with. It's more that I'm not quite familiar with that result. So one last thing now, if I can find it, which I can, is let's just tackle it with, I keep saying one last thing. There's so many things to try out on this, and of course, you know, there are other things I do need to try. So I use my slice tool a lot. I would come in here, let me bring my light back over so you can see. So I'd come in here, and if I wanted to go back to the white surface, I would use my tool to take back that pigment without damaging the tooth of the paper. Same there. Oh, that sounds like I'm just doing it straight onto sandpaper. I expect the LuxArchival to do exactly the same. Yeah. So I can come in there with my knife, cut through, and then if I want to come in then with my pencil, I can make brighter marks in through those cuts, because I'm basically taking it back down to the virgin tooth of the paper. So let's just spin these around. Let's have a quick look at what we did over the course of all of those little tests. So obviously we've just done the dry tests at the top. We talked our way back down through those dry tests as well. So our wet tests now have dried quite well. So we said about the inks, the different bleed. This one was a lot more controlled. This one's got a lovely cauliflower, more uncontrolled effect. This one has actually worked out a lot softer than I expected. Really don't like the watercolour pencils on the UArt. See, they've just muddied and there's a bit of a weird texture going on in there. The watercolour pens have kind of all bled into one colour. Again, that mudifying a little bit as well. Inktense as well, I've got a bit of texture there. They bled out quite nicely where I've pulled them out, but yeah. Colours, I think it's just the underlying dirty colour of the UArt's not helping it at all. Watercolour pencils on the Pastelmat, beautifully, really nicely controlled, and they've held the colour blend into each one really nicely. The transition's been nice. Same with the Inktense, that seemed to work really nicely on here, and same with the watercolour pens. You can see that I've pulled out, you know, the pigment here with more water, and also you can see that there were 3 colours that I used there. Compare that to the LuxArchival. As we've said, that it's quite obvious it's grabbing a lot more pigment. So if you wanted more of this effect that you get on the Pastelmat, you need to go in with an even lighter touch so that you're grabbing an equal amount of pigment. So you need an even lighter touch on the LuxArchival, or if that's the result, the finished result you're going for, and you don't want to have to keep working adding more layers like you would on the Pastelmat, that's what you're going with. That gives you such a solid foundation for then building details over the top. It's absolutely perfect. Again, it seems to have bled all of the colours into one here. There's no distinction. But again, you've got to sort of see what you want. Inktense has come out. See how vibrant the colour of the Inktense has come out? Hasn't got a nice transition quite the same as the Pastelmat. But I'm wondering again with the Inktense, that is just a case of it grabbing more pigment. So I'm hoping those few little tests have helped. I know Lisa Lockery will have done some amazing stuff with the powder blender. I am going to do some powder blender bits, but I need to wait for my throat and everything to heal up better first before I start using any fixatives, etc. I am working on this tutorial, which I'm going to get onto the fur and the inner part of the eye next. And after looking at everything we've used here, I'm trying to debate what I'm going to use for. I might go in and just use the solvent, so I'll do a really light application, again using the Derwent Light Fast, because that's what I've started off using on the eye. Use the solvent just to fill the area quickly, and then we'll just add in a little bit of fur texture using dry pencils and a knife. So that will be a full tutorial up for you. So yeah, I hope you've learned something from that. If you haven't already subscribed to my channel, my YouTube channel, it's a little square just down in the corner. Please do just click on it. It really helps my my viewing figures, my statistics. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all again soon.